Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us for our branding podcast titled Apple, Beyonce, and You: How to Build and Grow Your Brand. My name's Patty Rio. I'm the president of ODEA, and I don't think that there's any more overused or misused word in marketing besides branding. So, we're going to really take a look at what a brand truly is and how you can go about building your own. So, let me start with just something that happens to us every week, right? You have certainly met someone new either in your personal or professional travels this week. And whenever we meet someone new, we can't help but make that quick assessment, that gut instinct as to what type of person that is. We might meet someone and think that they're witty or they're smart based upon how they verbally express themselves. We might think that they're a little wild based on how they're dressed, or just based on our quick interactions, we might think that they're a little bit shady. So, as much as we all say we don't judge, it's just natural instinct for us to make that first or gut impression. The reality is that we do the exact same thing with companies. So we might think that one is witty based upon their advertising, based upon those marketing messages that they send, like Geico. We might think someone is smart based upon their product offering and how they present information through their website, through webinars, etc. So someone like Salesforce. Certainly there's companies out there with that wild persona, somebody like Mountain Dew. And even some shady companies, someone like Uber who's gotten some bad press lately, we might begin thinking of them as a bit shady. So for every company that we interact with, from Google to Coca-Cola to Starbucks to Microsoft, every company we interact with as a person or as a company purchasing or person purchasing for our company, we have that perception in our mind as to who they are. And that really is what a brand is. It's the set of expectations, memories, stories, and relationships that, taken together, account for someone's decision to choose one product or service over another. If I don't have those expectations, memories, if I haven't interacted with you, it's what I think I know based upon what I've experienced from your company, whether it's marketing messages or seeing others use your product, etc. And this definition comes from Seth Godin, and we think it's a pretty solid definition of brand. Other definitions of brands or components of brands are the story, the emotions, the expectations. It's how we think and feel about what you do. And what's very interesting is that a brand is both factual and emotional. So it's absolutely based on facts, but it's also based on how I feel. And truly, at the end of the day, what we believe a brand is the slice of my brain, that area of my brain that your company or your products own, right? Your brand only exists in the minds of your customers and prospects. Now, how I think, that slice of my brain that you own, is what you impact by how you build your brand. So, what does go into the components of brand building? Certainly, no matter if you're B2B or B2C, word of mouth is a huge component of brand. What someone I trust says about you as a company or your products has huge weight in my decision making. Certainly, especially those in the B2C world. So, what are some of the brand building exercises that, even if you haven't gone through a branding process, happen just automatically in the environment in which we live? And certainly, first and foremost, is word of mouth. What someone, whether it's a friend or a colleague, says about your company or about your products has huge weight in my decision making. It does go into that slice of my brain and my expectations and stories that I have around your company or product. The transparency of social media has had a huge impact in being able to spread word of mouth even farther. So if I'm sitting and enjoying a lunch, instead of just talking with the person across from me, I can post or tweet, and suddenly all my friends know that I'm enjoying myself or maybe not enjoying myself. So social media has had a huge impact on word of mouth and the ability to spread a brand. Certainly for those of us in the B2B world, especially professional services, referrals are huge. And if you don't think you have a brand, but you're getting referrals, what those referrals say about you, that really truly is oftentimes the core of your brand. Right? I got a guy, I got a lady. When someone's talking about needing a service, you should call Sam, he's X, or you should call Sue, she's Y. That X and Y are components of Sam and Sue's brand. Whether it's he's smart, he cares, he digs deeper, she walks you through it, she's the best lawyer, he's the best accountant. All of that goes into that slice of my brain when I think about your company or your product. So why all the confusion? Part of it is because we marketers use branding for so many different components of marketing. Certainly company names and products are referred to as brands. We talk about logos as a brand, and it's certainly an important component. Taglines, also a component of your brand. Even people will refer to themselves as a brand, a la Beyonce, and we'll put a value on that. We talk about things like brand hierarchy and brand loyalty, and as marketers we'll go on and on and on. So it's certainly understandable why there's confusion about what a brand really is. But if instead of looking at it from your point of view, you look at it from your customer's point of view and really remember that your brand only exists in the mind of your customers and prospects, and it's that slice of their mind, of their brain, that they're willing to give your company or your products. That's the best definition of brand. All the rest of what we just went through are components. So let's talk a little bit more about those components of a strong brand. So first of all, there's the visual identity of your brand. So just as when you met someone new this week, how they presented themselves impacted what you immediately thought of them, of your gut reaction, the same thing happens for company and products. So certainly your logo is the most concise representation of your brand. Outside of that, it's supported by your brand colors and image choices that you have around your brand. All of that, much like the appearance of someone, how someone is dressed, how they wear their hair, how they carry themselves as a visual identity of a person, these are the visual identities of your brand. What's your verbal identity? So again, going back to the person that you met for the first time this week, how did they present themselves verbally? Were they casual? Were they very professional? Did they use grammar and word choice correctly? All of that impacted how you thought of them. And the same thing happens with companies on the branding side. What are the words that you choose to use to describe yourself? What is the tone and the voice you use? Are you a very casual brand? Are you a very professional brand? And how does that impact what I think when I think of your company? Your communication choices also impact how I think of your company, how I think of your product. What channels are you choosing to use to send your messages? What do you look like on the web, where we know so many folks take their first research steps by Googling or searching on your company or on you on LinkedIn? Are you present on those channels? Are you present on social media? What mediums are you using? Are you a very visual brand that needs to be using video? As we know, video continues to be more and more important part of the mix. Are you a very traditional brand that is relying on print advertising still? What are those mediums and those channels that you're using? Your location can also actually impact your brand. Where do you choose to have your headquarters? Where do you choose to have your store locations? Certainly walk up and down Michigan Avenue here in Chicago and you will see a lot of tech companies that were not there previously. How does that change how I think about technology in my life? Is it something that I browse for and shop for, just like I do from the clothing, accessory, and shoe stores that are traditionally what we think of when we think of Michigan Avenue? So, how to build a brand? Certainly, you have a brand. Being in business, having customers, having that slice of their mind, you definitely have a brand. Call Sam, call Sue. He or she is. For many of us, that referral, that is our brand. But as you're moving forward and looking to constructively create the brand, that slice of your brain, how you want people to think about your company and your products, how do we go about that? So for our process, we start with some different inputs. Number one is really your team marketing assessment, pulling from your team 20 to 25 questions of what do you currently think that customers believe in your brand? How have you positioned your company? What are those words that you do want associated with what you do? What are the words that you don't ever want associated with what you do? So that team assessment is really to take a deep dive into your company's efforts and considerations to this point, and also to help you start doing some good thinking about the branding process and how you want customers and future customers to perceive you and have those stories in their brain. So next we do customer and lost customer interviews. This is really to better understand what are your customers, lost customers, future customers feeling about your company. What are their expectations? Are they aligned with the messaging and the marketing efforts that you've been putting forth up to this point? Very interesting to talk with lost customers. What were their expectations and where were the deviations from that maybe led them to not being a customer any longer? And then we also look at additional research. That might be primary, secondary research, really trying to understand what's going on in your industry, what's going on in the target audience or audiences that you're selling to. Your trade associations can be a great resource for additional research. And we'll go into that a little bit more in these second sections. This is really the environment. So we take a look at the environment, the ecosystem that you're living in. We really dig into your target audiences. What impacts them? What's important to them? What are the just kind of costs of doing business? Like the baseline expectations that they have of you from a company that you really can't differentiate on, because that's just really what I expect from you if you're going to be in this space, if you're going to try and sell me, if you're going to provide me with a service. So where are your target audiences? How are they changing? We take a look at your competitors. Are your competitors well branded? Do they already own a slice of my brain as far as the company that they are, the products that they provide? And then finally, what's going on in your industry? We don't know of any industry that isn't being impacted by technology. How is your industry being impacted by technology, and how can you take advantage of that? Or are there parts of that that are simply, again, that cost of doing business, my base expectations that you really can't differentiate or build a brand, own a slice of my brain around? You simply have to provide them as everyone else does. So what's going on in your industry? The third area is what we like to call magic, or this is where our team really does the heavy lifting. So we look at what we call plus deltas. So the plus is where is there great alignment between what your team believes, what your customers have told us, where your industry is going, where competitors have not differentiated themselves. Where's there those beautiful plus moments where your brand just feels very intuitive and very solid. And then outside of that, where's their deltas? Where is their line where maybe your team isn't aligned? Where there are areas where what your customers are wanting and needing you're not yet providing or letting them know that you provide? Where's the industry or your ecosystem or your target audience is going to that maybe you haven't realized yet? And there's huge opportunities within those deltas. Oftentimes that's where we find real opportunity for being that aspirational part of your brand. right? That emotional part of your brand. The pluses, honestly, can oftentimes feel like that very factual part of your brand, that very gut instinct. Yes, that's who we are. The deltas often lead us to that aspirational component of your brand. We look a lot at your differentiators. Again, where can you provide expectations, stories, deliverability that's very different than what your competitors are doing. The more differentiated your brand is, the more concise that space in my brain that I give you is, the more likely I am to define you as that. And then we refine on it a lot. We refine on colors, logos, everything visual. What does it represent? What is it showing? And we refine heavily on word choice. What does trusted advisor say that partner doesn't? What does peer say that partner doesn't? All of those types of word choices, really refining and pushing through them, using a lot, especially of your customer input, because their nuances of word choice often have meaning behind them, and the power is within those meanings. So words like value and partner and quality have been so overused, they really don't have any meaning for us any longer. But what they mean to a specific customer, as we dig deeper and push, that's where we find real power within word choice. And then finally, your outcomes, the deliverables through this process. Number one is a brand guide. Oftentimes is the visual component of your brand, your logo, your colors, your typography. Can include things like image choice, color placement. So really becomes a graphical guide, whether it's you, another marketing agency, us, anyone executing branding and marketing on your behalf, to make sure it is consistent. The second component, and kind of the companion to that guide, is a messaging playbook. And that really is the verbal components. It starts with a bold statement, it goes into a narrative, pillars, proof points, everything supporting each other in order to give you a really solid playbook. And then finally, there's sometimes some other components depending on the complexity of your unique situation. We've had some clients who have very much almost a vocabulary of their own. So we do a brand glossary to make sure that everyone who's communicating on behalf of your company, of your brand, is saying the same things, referring in the same way. Brand swag and gems are some of those components of that verbal that rise to the top. And we'll take a look at some of those. At the end of the day, it's all about getting everyone singing from the same songbook, right? It's making sure that anyone who executes marketing on your behalf, whether it's your president, whether it's a partner, whether it's a marketing agency, whether it's your team, everyone has the same songbook so that you're singing the same song. Because consistency is key. If you want to carve that space in my brain, you have to be consistent so that I know time after time after time it's you, and it seems like you, it sounds like you, it looks like you. Just as when you meet someone in that first instance and then get to know them, how who they are just continues to repeat and support oftentimes that first impression you had. Now, I will warn you, you'll get bored with your own branding and your own marketing. You'll get bored long before your customers and future customers do. Keep in mind how many thousands of marketing messages I am pummeled with every day. You have to cut through that clutter. So certainly your consistency and your differentiators will help. But as much as I might like you, I probably will ignore a large number of your marketing messages. So you will see all of them. I, as your customer or future customer, will only see a small fraction. So you're going to get bored with your own marketing long before I do. So let's quickly run through a couple samples. The first is a brand guide. Again, this is your visual components. So here's some logo usage. Some logo usage that is not acceptable, helping folks understand proper placement, additional intricacies, color specifications. This client has colors specific to their products, so some additional color specifications there. Some usage often helps, as you've got multiple designers working to help keep everything consistent and know what gets some priority over what gets less. Even things like typography and font choice become parts of this brand guide. And it's a living document. It changes, not from a core. Again, that consistency is important, but adding to it, maybe as product lines changes or as additional image or additional channels are brought in for some of those samples, all of that can be added to this brand guide. From a verbal side, we start with a bold statement, and that sometimes bubbles up to become a tagline. Other times it just becomes that creative anchor for our team and other people as they're really working to make sure that everything is coming from that singular songbook for your brand. So the first sample is from industry association we work with. This one is from an accounting firm that we work with. And then finally, be bold is certainly our bold statement here at ODEA. The brand narrative really becomes the storytelling. This is the more extracted version of that bold statement. If the bold statement is the equivalent of your logo, from a verbal to visual side, this is the color and image choices equivalent. Your brand pillars. If you've gone through a strategic planning process, you've likely done core values, and that is what supports your strategic plan. Your brand pillars are what support your marketing. And if you have gone through that process, your core values and your marketing pillars really should kind of support each other and work hand in hand. Your proof statements sit underneath those brand pillars. These are, if you say you're that, prove it to me. And this is what helps you begin to kind of prove those brand pillars. All of this obviously kind of sits on top of each other and supports each other. So your bold statements kind of at the top of your verbal messaging, your narrative below that, your proof pillars supporting that, your brand pillars supporting that, and then your proof statements below. Underneath that then becomes all of your marketing messages, right? Your brand messages are very much based upon those proof statements and the narrative. Your sales messages obviously still need to happen, still feel like they're part of the same family, still coming from that same songbook, but much more specific from a sales perspective. Why us over this? The three things you should consider, what you should know. And then below that, especially for our industrial and tech clients, it really gets into those technicals, those features, those attributes, those benefits that as I dig deeper as a B2B buyer, I want to know as I'm making my choices. Keep in mind, you're going to get tired of your own marketing long before your customers and certainly your prospective customers will. Consistency is key. Repetitiveness is key. My being to at a glance, knowing that postcard, that flyer, that email, that website came from you because it all looks like it belongs to you and supports that slice, that sliver in my brain of what I think of you. That is branding, but you will get tired of your own. So obviously ROI is an important component of any marketing effort that you do. Here's one definition of the ROI of branding. It's the sum total of how much extra people will pay or how often they will choose you, based on that expectations, the memories, the stories, based on the part of my brain that I've dedicated to your company or your product. How much more am I willing to pay? Or how more am I willing to buy from you? That is the ROI of branding. It supports all of your other marketing efforts that have to reiterate why you're worth more or why I should choose you and choose you more often. Every year Forbes comes out with their brand rankings of US companies, and last year these were the top 5 values placed on the brands of these companies, and it really talks about how much technology has impacted our life as you look at these 5. What's interesting is that the methodology used, and really talking about allocating a percentage of earnings to the brand based on the role that brands play. even in their example, something like airlines, where brand might play less of an impact, but where price and convenience are more important. Airlines have certainly done their loyalty programs, their miles and their points programs, in trying to build some of that loyalty in, even if they're not one that depends on brand. So interesting methodology from Forbes. At the end of the day, the key takeaway is really to remember that your brand and the value of your brand is what sits in your customers' and future customers' minds. It's based on their expectations, based on their interactions, based on their memories and their feelings of who they believe you are as a company or as a product. Am I willing to pay more? Or am I willing to choose you? Or am I willing to choose you more often? That is what a brand is. So before I let you go, I do have a confession to make. And that is, nothing that we've been talking about matters unless you live your brand. My lived experience, what happens when I interact with your company or your products, will always outweigh your branding and marketing efforts. It's why we feel it's so important that a company be able to live its brand. That yes, you absolutely should have aspirational and emotional components of your brand, but you have to be able to live those. You have to be able to aspire to those. And the factual components of your brand, you absolutely have to be solid on. I expect that of a company or a product that I interact with. And if I am disappointed, it will eat away at that little slice of my brain that I gave you, and my lived experience will replace what I thought I knew. So always make sure that you live your brand. Thank you so much for your time with us today. We at ODEA just want to remind you to be bold within your marketing. Thank you so much.